crap.
Good afternoon, friends. I'd like to welcome you today to What's in Tegan's Storage Locker. It's the show that dares to ask the question, just what is in my storage locker? The answer is pretty much, it's always going to be comic books. I have piles and piles of unsorted comic books in my storage locker. I go pick a fistful. We, sift through whichever ones look like they might have something interesting to tell us. So let's start off today with ROM. ROM number 51, with a cover by the great Mike Zeck. I don't remember him doing that many covers for ROM, but that's a nice looking version of Starshine there. ROM was kind of a miracle book. If you don't really know the story, there was a ROM toy in, well, whatever the year this book launched, so that would have been like 79 or 80. There was a ROM toy, and it stiffed almost immediately. It did not do well. So you would probably have been right to guess that the ROM book would sink like a stone as well. But you would have been wrong, because even if no one bought the toy, people did buy the comic book. People bought the comic book for 75 issues. A bunch of annuals, too. And the toy, they never got anywhere. Well, he found his little rattle toy. But the toy, they never did any business with it. It was discontinued very quickly from what I understand. But the book, the toy company was perfectly happy to keep cashing those licensing fees for a failed toy. All right. Ooh, weight training is the proven way to reach peak condition. Just ask any pro. And the DP weight training course provided free with each DP barbell set with Orbitron weight discs tell you how to do it. Well, it's kind of an updated, Charles Atlas, although you might get more from the actual dumbbells than whatever, snake oil Charles Atlas was selling. I know it worked for, Flex Mentalo, but... Starshine. She's a space knight. She's bent on slaughter. I'm trying to remember. Is Starshine's the secret identity of the... Not secret identity, but she's the... Rom's human lover gets turned into into one of these space knights, and the whole thing is that Rom's a tragic hero because he had to give up his humanity to basically become a really super powerful cyborg. But his real body is still on Galador, which is the planet he's from. Oh, I was actually mentioning this ad to someone in another context the other day, because we were talking about when comic book characters from one company just appear on a page of another, in an ad. And I've found this ad in DC Comics, and it's always great to find a big old Spider-Man picture in the middle of a Batman comic book. So Starshine is going around destroying more dire wraiths. ROM stops to help a little boy find his mother. Oh, the Power Lords. These guys didn't go anywhere, but they tried. They had comics and toys and a video game, but no real takers for the Power Lords there. The first couple years after, He-Man, it was kind of a gold rush. So he's basically telling her, maybe you need to, chill out with being so, evil seeming in front of the humans. Oh, it is Brandy Clark. I'm not Brandy Clark any longer, though humanity may emerge with this cold, insensate space knight steel. Her soul died alongside her family at the hands of the demonic dire wraiths. Oh, so she's going through a big angst arc here. All right, it's been many years since I've done a full read-through on ROM. This is, by the way, this is, I guess I didn't mention, Sal Buscema and Mel Candido. Sal Buscema never drew a bad comic book. And he's still a couple years away, I think, from his real rebirth in the late 80s. But, you know, even here, you know, fundamentals are absolutely flawless, impeccable. In a lot of ways, his storytelling was a lot leaner than his brother's, if such a thing is possible. You know, I always thought of Sal as being, you know, spiritual cousin to Jim Aparo. You know, they're both minimalists, or at least they grew into a kind of minimalism. They're at someone's funeral. Oh, and ROM has to address the nation. That was another weird thing, is after a certain point, like, his war against the dire wraiths became, like, very public. And, you know, the X-Men and the Avengers and all those books crossed over to it. The dire wraiths were like a big deal for a significant period of time in the X-Men book. And people liked ROM. And then, you know, he wasn't owned by Marvel, so the rights, if I recall correctly, the rights were kind of a little bit difficult to pin down at some point. I know the Micronauts, there was some trouble with that. I think they're squared away by now. But they just, you know, then when they brought him back for, I want to say IDW, had ROM books without any of the Marvel mythology. Because most of this stuff was, you know, bolted on after the fact by Marvel. And, you know, Marvel, even the dire wraiths, they're a part of the Marvel universe, separate from ROM. They tried to sell the Space Knights as their own thing, separate from ROM, because Marvel even owned, like, Galador and the idea of a Space Knight. They just didn't own the guy. And so that's why he's been absent for decades. And, you know, they're doing the omnibuses, but very conspicuously, they still have not solicited a new ROM comic book. Maybe we'll get there in time. Oh, and they're advertising the Assistant Editors Month. Oh, this is after Assistant Editors Month, so they're talking about it after the fact. We just looked at one of the Assistant Editors books on the TikTok channel, the Fred Hembeck issue of Spectacular Spider-Man. Oh, the Marvel Tryout books this month. And there's the second of the Hercules limited series that they did in the early 80s. Bob Layton. Excellent, excellent. Maybe the best Hercules solo stories they've ever done. These Bob Layton Hercules. There was 2 limited series and a graphic novel, I think, to wrap it up. They were doing a lot of these special editions. You know, the Baxter paper reprints of the older books. They were doing the Steve Ditko run of Doctor Strange. They did the Elektra Saga, which was, and I even have a later printing of the Elektra Saga, but they basically went and they cut out only the Elektra parts from Frank Miller's Daredevil and put it together in a singular story. And they actually put out a couple different versions of that, because I have one they did in the 90s. It's an interesting artifact, you know, not something they do very often, but it sort of stands on its own to the side there. They did a Captain America special edition with the Steranko run on Captain America. Micronauts with the early run of Micronauts. Oh, they got up to 4, so they did like the good first stretch of the Micronauts in that feature. Micronauts also a Bill Mantlo licensed toy book that ran a lot longer than the toy line. And this was the month they released the Phoenix, the Untold Story, which was where they printed the pages from the first version of the last issue of the Dark Phoenix saga. I actually have it in a box right here. I'll probably put it on the channel at some point. Something to look forward to. Dave Cockram's Futurian graphic novel. James Bond role-playing game. So he's asking the world to... Oh, so this is his, like, announcement to the world. Heretofore I have attempted to seek out Wraithkind in secrecy, fearful of alarming humanity at large. That tactic has failed. Too many innocents have suffered. Too many whom knowledge might have saved have died. So he's basically making a public service announcement, like... He is telling the rest of the Earth and the rest of the dire wraiths, like, I'm just going to whip up this whole planet against you. And that's the last third of the book, is building to this this war, Wraith War, which ends up being every superhero on Earth, the Avengers, the X-Men, Spider-Man, the Hulk, everyone coming out against the Wraiths. And it's actually one of the very earliest examples of a cross-company crossover. And of course, it's never been reprinted as such, because even individual chapters have been, but they've never been able to reprint the actual, main spine of the book, which is the ROM storyline here, for the last, couple of years. ROM is showing up in other books periodically to fight dire wraiths. All right, so AD&D video game. Good old Intellivision. There's an obscure system for you. The game is next to impossible. Getting the flight jacket is a little easier. Oh, so you could win a prize and get the Super Cobra flight jacket. That'd be fun to have. You know it. All right, so what's next here? What's next? All right, how about some Ultraverse? Issue 1 of Sludge. This was Steve Gerber's Ultraverse book. And this also has a chapter of Barry Windsor-Smith. Maybe we'll just flip over and look at that first. This also has a chapter of Barry Windsor-Smith's Rune, because prior to the beginning of the Rune series, they serialized Rune across the back of the line. So if you wanted to read the whole story that eventually became Rune Zero, you had to buy all 11 of these October Ultraverse titles to get the new Barry Windsor-Smith character. That's how big a deal Barry Windsor-Smith was at the time. And we read Rune. We read all of Rune on my TikTok channel, except for the Zero issue, because it was only available as a limited edition. Edited by Steve Gerber. Interesting. They had Gerber doing editing work. Oh, is this the first one? Is this chapter 1? I think this is chapter 1. Because it begins with him casting, because this is what he did. He had these magic runes. He was a vampire from space. He cast the runes, and the runes told him what to do. And he's apparently dying, so he's dying at the beginning of this series because he made the mistake of trying to eat an atom bomb. He was kind of a single-minded fellow. I can't recommend any rune that Barry Windsor-Smith did. There are many rune stories that Barry Windsor-Smith did not do, and I'd be a little bit more circumspect around those if I were you. Maybe, don't let them out of your sight. But the Barry Windsor-Smith rune is just straight up one of the best comics of the 90s. It is. It's maybe not quite as good as Weapon X, because it's, essentially an unfinished story that, the company fell apart. And he only did the first 6 issues of it. But what he did, as good as anything he did it's different. It's sort of drawn a little bit, it's drawn with a little bit more dynamism. It seems almost like he was working faster, because he was doing monthly throughout for Valiant and Malibu. He was doing monthly in the 90s. He didn't have to be, for love of the game. All right. This was this flood relief, a book that Malibu did with their Ultraverse line for the American Red Cross. Oh, here's an intro to Nightman. Now, Nightman is kind of an interesting artifact because of all of the Ultraverse books. This guy had a TV show. It ran, I think, for a good couple years. Starts off with art by Derek Robertson. Derek Robertson, he had been working for Marvel by now, I think. But he did a fair amount of work for the Ultraverse line as well. I want to say he was the first artist for the Nightman. This is from the first issue. But he did a couple of other things. Oh wow! And here's the Mighty Magnor. They did a Magnor book, the Sergio Aragonés and Mark Evener. This was their superhero parody guy who had a series at Malibu in the mid-90s. It's Sergio. It's Sergio Aragonés doing a superhero parody. It's maybe not quite as solid as Gru, but you know, what is. Definitely, if you see a Sergio Aragonés comic in the wild, you buy it. You know, even if it's the Mighty Magnor, you're still probably going to enjoy yourself. Oh, Hero Illustrated. Hero Illustrated was fun. The writing in there was slightly better than the writing in Wizard, believe it or not. I don't know if that's a hard sell for you or not, but yeah. Hero actually had, some fairly decent writing. And, the Wizard had decent writing here and there. You had to look for it. The specials. Usually the best writing was reserved for the specials at Wizard. All right, so Sludge number 1. Steve Gerber, Aaron Lopresti. Another name that you probably have, are more familiar with. Aaron Lopresti. I just said it. Aaron Lopresti. Gary Martin, inker. Paul Mounts, coloring. Jurassic Park Pogs. Get them while they're hot. Order by the caseload. So this Sludge guy, he's kind of like a Swamp Thing, Man Thing type character, only he doesn't live out in the swamp. He lives in the sewers, so he's made of sludge. He's a sludge man. He's just a disgusting little sludge monster. But he used to be a dude. He was transformed. His brain was a little bit scrambled. Here's gangbangers out just indiscriminately shooting people in the street. There you go. And these spree killers try to get Sludge and the bullets. This is a nice looking comic, I must say. Early Aaron Lopresti is pretty solid here. With the Gary Martin inks. That's nice. Nice panel right there. So, we get to see, because this is issue 1, basically he can take just about any amount of damage and just, make weird slurping noises and be back to business here. Oh, that's creepy. He can melt people's flesh. Oh, that's nasty. Because he's like made of toxic waste, I guess. So he can just reach out and he melts that guy's face. That's rough. There's no code on this. No code on this. He pistol whips this guy. Yeah, Sludge takes no prisoners. Oh, he does a Bane. Wow. In a tiny little panel, too. That's fun. Wow, he kills all of those men. He just kills them all. So here's an evil corporate guy. I'm guessing maybe he had something to do with the Sludge's accident. And there's some sort of... Oh, and this is where we see, maybe this is this guy, yeah. Oh, so he's getting fired, and he's going to go back to his old job as a cop, but they're just going to kill him instead. Oh, this is nice looking. But I mean, very much, you know, your Swamp Thing and Man Thing origin. And, you know, if you're going to get anyone to do a misunderstood swamp creature, Steve Gerber's your guy. Ooh, rough. Well, this is very much a 90s comic. Very much a 90s comic. Even though Steve Gerber wrote it, he knew how to write for the era. Oh, so he's in a lot of pain. Oh, that's the worst part. He's a swamp monster who feels pain. See, I don't think this was necessarily. I'm trying to remember. I don't remember anything about the story here. It's 30 years removed. I don't necessarily think this was anything outside of you know, what you might expect from, you know, Steve Gerber earning a paycheck for the Ultraverse with a character very much like, you know, who he worked with at Marvel. The Ultra Files, you get your various news. Oh, guest ultratorial by senior editor Dan Danko, talking about the talking about Rune, talking about Barry Windsor-Smith coming on board, talking about the Skybox cards. Breakthrough was their first big crossover, which didn't really end up amounting to much. It was just like something happened on the moon and everyone responded to it in some way, if I'm recalling correctly. And then it ended with them going to the moon, some of them going to the moon and getting like a primer about the creation of the Ultraverse, if I recall correctly. You know, George Perez did it. You know, George Perez did a few books for the Ultraverse, which, you know, will probably never be reprinted. Yeah, Firearm, which I think I've mentioned before. Excellent book. Sort of proto-Starman, because it's James Robinson working with Cully Hamner. Hard Case, I don't remember that one. I don't think I bought that one. Mantra. Mantra was one of my favorite books for every month it ran. I love Mantra. Loved it. Steve Englehart on Derek Robinson on The Nightman. Prime with art by Norm Brayfogle. I don't think I ever read an issue of Prototype. It was, you know, kind of their Iron Man character. How we doing here? Oh, we're doing pretty good. We're doing pretty good. What next? What next? Oh, well, here's something interesting. From a little bit later, I just happened to have a random issue of the 2000s Checkmate. This was Greg Rucka. Issue 3, August of 06. I know I read this comic book at the time. I don't remember anything that was happening in the book at this time. I have to admit, Checkmate, it was kind of central to what was going on at DC for a while because they were, you know, the 06. Oh, yeah, they had a bunch of espionage going on in the books at that point, leading up to Infinite Crisis, if I recall correctly, if my time frame is right. So I don't really remember what was going on at all. Rucka was writing a fair amount of DC at this point. This version of the book had Mr. Terrific in it, I think. I think that's why he's on the cover. Count Vertigo, who is a sort of an inheritance from the sort of similarly minded Suicide Squad. And this is just superheroes doing like espionage stuff. Like they start out in China doing something or other. Oh, and these guys have been spy stuff in the middle of nowhere in China. Here we go. Cliff Richards, guest penciler. Not a name I know that well. Bob Wyachek and Steve Bird, guest inkers. So they're doing something or other. I don't remember who these characters... Sasha Bordeaux. She was a Batman supporting character, if I recall correctly. Oh, there's the ill-fated Brandon Routh's Superman. I watched that movie a few years ago. It was kind of a bad trip, to be honest with you. Yeah, there's spies going around doing spy stuff. Spy stuff is never really my, total cup of tea, I must admit. Doing something, or yeah, they got their base in Switzerland here. I remember one of the interesting things is he put together a cast with characters pulled from across the line, because it's King Faraday, Mr. Terrific. I want to say Amanda Waller as well. Oh, here's a Dodge ad from the brief period when they were having, ads for adult products in the comic books alongside the cartoon ads. 2007 Dodge Caliber, $14,000 starting at. Man, $14,000 for a new car would be pretty nice today. Certainly nothing for under $20,000. This was during the bull years when they were still putting everything out on DVD that had never been on DVD before. Superman, the animated series. Justice League. That was probably the first time for that. That probably had been out on home video before, if I'm recalling correctly. People were still buying DVDs. People are starting to buy DVDs again. Yeah, I have no idea what's going on in this comic book. They're talking about Cobra. Remember, DC has their own Cobra. Rush City, don't... Oh, cover by Jock. That's why it's a nice looking piece. I don't remember that. Chuck Dixon. Timothy Green II. Don't know that name. Oh, yeah, and Alan Scott was one of the members of Checkmate for this version too. Oh, and this he's got a sharpened stake. Oh, that's it. He's going after Green Lantern with a piece of wood. There you go, because that's his weakness. Oh, and it's a Cobra guy because he's got snake eyes. Oh, but you can't sneak up on Alan Scott. I don't remember why he had I don't remember for how long he had the eye patch for. Oh, there's Amanda Waller. Oh, goodness. Well, she's not a fighter, but she can take care of herself when she needs to. Yeah, I remember this book being a lot of this, like mini characters sitting around having conversations about espionage stuff. And I don't necessarily care for espionage even in movies or anything, so this isn't a bad comic book by any means. In fact, I remember, thinking at the time that this was a decent comic book that just wasn't my cup of tea at all. But I think I still flipped through it because it was it was a significant book for a while, if I recall correctly. Certainly in terms of the tone and the line around this time, this was very much representative of what the better books were doing. Both Marvel and DC had a period where there was a lot of espionage, flavor in the lines, and I find espionage dry in general. But superhero books, they certainly found a degenerative connection. Oh, and yeah, another character that that was in this version of the book was Fire, the former Green Fire, from the Justice League International. Remember, there's a new book out with Fire and Ice, and it's kind of portraying her as a bit of a how do you put it? not a very competent person. But remember, she's also a spy. She did espionage work. She was in Checkmate for years. I still believe that she's, more or less an incompetent person. But ironically, because she's more comfortable and seems more at ease doing the spy stuff. So that's some interesting characterization there. Are they... Dan Didio is talking about something or other. All-Star Superman 4 was shipping. That was that version of the Green Lantern Corps. That lasted for years, and it wasn't actually a bad book at times. They had a good mix of characters on that, if I recall correctly. Superman Returns, the video game. How are we doing on time? Oh, we're doing great on time. We're doing great on time for once. Well, how about... Oh, here's one. Here's a fun one. X-Men Annual 95. Now, I'll just say straight up in advance. There's a very good chance that I might do this one on the show sometime. Because for an X-Men Annual from 95... with what appears to be I keep wanting to say Jeff Matsuda, but it's probably not. It's probably not Jeff Matsuda. But who it is drawn by is who the interiors are actually drawn by is Bryan Hitch, working with Bob McLeod, and that's a good matchup. But like I say, I may very well do this on the show sometime because it's a full giant-size issue of vintage Bryan Hitch. And he was doing fill-ins and annuals for the X-Men books for a good period in the 90s. That's sort of where he cut his teeth, so to speak, because they saw immediately this was a guy. And look, this is just a few years into his career, and this is already a fantastic-looking comic book. Cannonball's coming to visit. Generation X, it looks like. And there's the White Queen. Doing something or other. That's there's siblings. The Guthrie siblings. Oh, so it's about another of the... All of the Guthrie siblings eventually got dragged into the X-Men saga. One of them had a pet Sentinel. This is apparently a sibling named Joel. Some sort of... Oh, here we go. This is what eventually became of the Ultraverse. Is they ended up having crossing over with Marvel all the time, and the Exiles was an Ultraverse book that they put Juggernaut and Black Knight on, which, if that sounds weird, that is weird. Early Dan Panosian work on that piece. So I don't know what's going on here. Something about... Oh, what are you doing? What are you doing? Have you come to be a problem? Have you come to be a problem? So there's some sort of secret base somewhere. They're doing something that the X-Men probably aren't going to like, I'm guessing. What are you doing? They're hanging out. Oh, so they just get a car full of X-Men. So Storm and Bishop go with him down to Kentucky. Oh, Wolverine's in the car too. Okay. Storm, Bishop, Wolverine coming down south for a Guthrie family get-together. It's nice work. I'm not going to even bother to try and read along with the story. Who is this? Is this Scott Lobdell? That would have been him. Oh, Terry Kavanagh. Terry Kavanagh. He was doing a fair amount of work for the X Office as well. Oh, and they're already selling Black September. Black September was their big crossover that was, so when was this? This was November 95. Black September was the big crossover that was supposed to launch the new Ultraverse that was an annex to the Marvel Universe. And, yeah, it wasn't the beginning of the end, it was the afternoon of the end, in hindsight. Yeah, Spider-Man with Prime. The bloom is off the rose by then. So they're infiltrating some sort of anti-mutant group, because there's no shortage of those. Oh, interesting. So it's this guy who has like this vision of the Age of Apocalypse, and he like is telling people about this like awful dream he have and why the mutants are so awful. That's an interesting twist. I don't remember that. Oh, Phantom 2040. They tried with the put the Phantom in the future in the 90s. Now 2040 is only like 17 years away, so it'll be interesting to see what he's doing. You know, when we get there the hard way. Okay, it's maybe getting a little bit less detailed as it goes on, which, you know, it's how it works with annuals sometimes. We looked at a Colleen Duran Guardians of the Galaxy annual a while ago that sort of goes through the same progression. Like, you know, very good artist who nevertheless has a tight deadline on a really big book. That's a nice page, though. Who's doing the coloring for this? It's a garish little pink. Glynis Oliver, there you go. Nice looking, like, you know, very garish pinks and purples there. This is like the last half second before all these books were going to start to be colored by computer. But this is a nice looking book. Yeah, no doubt about it. I mean, this is even when it seems like maybe he's hurrying a little bit, it's still, you know, absolutely flawless. You know, he tells a story so remarkably well. You know, that's how he can get away with all those, you know, big double-page spreads that he came to, you know, make his name by. Those things are packed full of story. He tells a lot of story with his pictures. He still does. Oh, there you go. There's your guys. There's your guys. That's a nice piece. They could have put that in a poster magazine. Maybe they did. People sitting around talking. Oh, the Page is being held prisoner, so there's Cannibal to save his sister. Oh, man. Goodness. It's a beefy-looking bishop right there. It's a sure bet, mon ami. Am I in your way? He just frolicked behind me. Oh, he's still got the bone claws. You know, and after a certain point, you know, the bone claws could basically cut through anything, just like the metal claws, because they got sick of writing around that limitation. But he had the bone claws for 5 years. Like a good 5 years. He had bone claws, no adamantium. It took him a while to get around to undoing that. And the bone claws haven't been back since, even though they could have done it with, it would have been easy to do it during the Krakoa era, but they didn't. I guess no one really wanted to go back to that. Yeah, it's a nice looking book. Nice looking book, like I say. He started out almost completely, knowing, almost completely put together from the beginning, knowing how to put a comic book together. Oh, come on. He started out knowing pretty well how to put a comic book together. Now, this is a couple years into his career at least, but, already this is a nice looking book. What is this? Oh, X-Men Timeline. So this is got your main X-Men, just a little, with Gary Frank spot illustrations, looks like. But all the history of the characters. He joined the Avengers. Then he was an X-Factor. Then he lost his blue fur. Then he gained his fur back. There's Storm, all her different looks. She was a child for a while. Well, I mean, she was a child when she wasn't supposed to be a child. Most people are children at some point. Oh, and there she is. There's my girl. That's a nice piece of art right there. Wish I had that bigger. All the hits. Nice looking Mystique, too. Oh, there we go. I wonder if they did others for the rest of the annuals. I don't remember. I don't remember that a feature at all. What do we got here? What do we got? Oh, that looks interesting. How about an issue of Superman from 1996? This is well into the Triangle era. The Triangle era was the period where the books had, the Superman family of titles had a specific reading order, and that was what you were supposed to follow. And to this day, I still have piles and piles and piles of Superman books organized by triangle number because I love this era of the Superman books. They were consistent every week. You knew you were getting a readable comic, and sometimes it'd be great. Very rarely poor. David Michelini, after his run on Amazing Spider-Man, that's kind of the way it goes after you write Spider-Man or the X-Men. There's a good chance that you're going to go and write Superman or Batman. Kieron Dwyer, he had a run on Action Comics later on in the 90s, and I've always pretty much always bought anything I see with Kieron Dwyer's name on it because he is a very good artist. A little bit undersung. He could stand to actually probably get a little bit more shine from contemporary readers. Working with Dennis Rodier on inks. And this is during the period where he was still was he married by now or was he not married by now? I want to say that they weren't married yet. Oh, the engagement, it says that right on the cover. But they had been engaged for a while because they got engaged in like 1990. So the fact that they still weren't married by 96, and the thing is they only rushed to get married because Superman and Lois got married on the TV show. And I think they kind of regretted it, if I recall correctly, but on the other hand, nothing else they did with a single Superman when they undid the marriage with the New 52 was worth it. No one really had any time for any love interest for Superman, including Wonder Woman. People pretty much accept now, it's a given, that Lois Lane is pretty much, a package deal with him. And even if they may not have wanted to do the marriage at the time in the way that they did, at that point it was really just kind of making official what was more or less already tacit. You know, they'd already established, like, yeah, these people are kind of made for each other. Anything we try to put them together, or anything we try to do to put them apart, you're not really going to buy. And it's true to this day. No one really, you know, has any interest in seeing them separated. Let's see. Apparently had a crossover with Captain Marvel. They had a crossover week every now and a crossover month every now and again, where all the Superman books would have a guest on them. They did that a couple times, if I recall correctly. Oh, and Lori Lamaris. They had a Lori Lamaris storyline, if I recall correctly. She's living in Lois's bathtub. That's funny. That's funny. She needs to get ready for a date with Clark, and she doesn't like having Clark's ex living in the apartment with her. That makes sense. Kingdom Come Ad. Ron Troop. He was one of the bigger supporting players during this period. Lucy Lane's boyfriend, because they've never, as far as I know, they've never really been able to sell her and Jimmy as an item, even though historically that's what they were. But they don't have a lot of chemistry as a couple. Whereas I like this Ron Troop guy. I wonder what they did with him. I'm sure he's gone now because he's a 90s supporting character. But look at how good this is, how well it reads. Here's an ad for what was going on. I read the first few years of the reboot Legion of Superheroes, but I lost track with it at a certain point because it was just, you know, 2 books every month, a 2-book every month commitment, and eventually I just got behind. Like I say, I'm in and out with the Legion. I've read a fair amount of Legion, but I haven't read it all by any means. You know, swoop in and out. The relaunch of the Batman, the animated series book, they relaunched it as Batman and Robin Adventures instead of the Batman Adventures. Oh, it's the 90s, because Lois is wearing a loose cardigan, plaid skirt, and boots. There's your 90s for you. Yeah, you know, for all that we give, you know, most comic book artists, you know, crap for basically not really knowing how to draw real people clothes, these are kind of what people were wearing in 1996. These are, you know, fashions that you would have seen walking down the street. This isn't like, you know, Lois isn't like a fashion plate. These are just like normal people clothing from the period. Uh-oh, they're having emotional conversation. And there's something happening with some kind of weird, oh, it's a military ship of some, military prototype ship of some kind. Oh, and it's been hijacked by, I gave my entire life to the military only to have budget cuts force me out to pasture. So he's stealing a government tank then. That's kind of, there you go. Oh, he's giving her a hard time for, you know, she's given him a hard time for not paying any attention to her. Oh, and he has to go away in the middle of when they're having their big dramatic showdown. So of course, oh, that's drama right there. That's great. I was still getting my money's worth out of the Superman books well into the late 90s. Because it looks great. Even if, you know, behind the scenes, supposedly, things were starting to get a little bit rougher. From what we've heard, by the time, you know, Ron Friends was working for them, he didn't have the best. I saw an interview with him. I think the Kayfabe Boys did that interview with him where he talks about working on the Superman books, being in slightly less than ideal circumstances behind the scene, but they were still capable of putting out perfectly competent comic books every week. I'm sorry. I'm easily impressed. I'm easily impressed. I guess that would have been a 3-issue Batman crossover. I don't remember. I was still buying it at least through when Darryl Banks was drawing it, because I like Darryl Banks' art quite a bit. Here's an ad for that Mr. Miracle series we were talking about the other day. So he's making short work of these missiles. There's nothing Superman can't deal with. He's having to take care of this tank that's gone rogue. He has to bury these torpedoes under the ocean floor. You know, he's basically doing Superman stuff. He's got the super mullet. It's not technically a mullet. It's long hair. He doesn't really have it short in the front like a mullet would. He just has a full head of glorious hair. But, you know, people call it the mullet. So. It's not supposed to be a mullet. That's just how men were wearing their hair a little bit more at the time. You know, it's not the worst thing in the world that anyone's ever done, just having, you know, longer hair. Of course, you know, people didn't figure out that, you know, Clark Kent was wearing a ponytail in the period too, so, you know. They always had the two-page letters pages. Oh, and Olive Beamer letter. He was in the pages a lot at this time. Oh, they're talking about the Trial of Superman series, which I remember. I don't think I got every chapter of that. I think I want to say that I couldn't. I missed a couple on that one. All right, how we doing on time? Oh, we're almost there. We're getting there. Maybe something else just real quick here. What do we got? What do we got? How about... Well, all right, let's look at that issue of Spider-Man real quick. This is another Howard Mackie book, but with Bart Sears. Bart Sears surprisingly came back and did a fair amount of work for Marvel at this period, I want to say. Even after the turn of the century, he had a run on Captain America and the Falcon. You know, he had a very interesting, distinctive style. Oh, here's New Saturday Morning. They're still pushing Saturday mornings in the late 90s, although wouldn't be too much longer before they just got rid of the Saturday morning cartoons. I certainly wasn't watching Saturday morning cartoons anymore. Oh, an ad for the John Byrne's Second Coming on Hulk. Looked great. Ron Garney and Dan Green drew a nice-looking Hulk, but I wouldn't recommend you try to read this book. All right, so this is a team-up between Spider-Man and Marrow. And, okay, so someone's kidnapping people and pulling them into the sewer. All right, that makes sense. All right, this is Howard Mackie, Bart Sears, and Scott Hanna on inks. Nice. That is a solid team. Scott Hanna has been inking a lot of John Romita Jr. stuff lately. Not really an inker whose work I ever paid that much attention to, but I have to admit his work with John Romita Jr. Recent work has impressed me enough that I've been paying more attention to the name when I see it now. So, you know, Bart Sears is an interesting talent. He was sort of you know, he had a run on the Justice League. His entry in the 90s sweepstakes was this, I don't remember what it's called. It was a weird comic book. It didn't, that was a series of pinups that weren't stapled together. It was just like loose leaf sheets of paper. Like, I think it was polybagged. It was an interesting gimmick that I don't know if it went over well with anyone. But he was also the art columnist for Wizard for a good few years. At least a couple years. He used a lot of lines. I think he's been criticized for being someone who used a fair amount of lines. But now you can look back and see, like, it's a very interesting style. Get someone like Hannah working with him who can really, bring out that the nature of that line, and it starts to look kind of interesting, actually. Animorphs. I forgot they did an Animorphs TV show. I think I mentioned that the other day. Avengers Forever. Oh, such a good book. Such a good book. I can't really the thing is, it's a great book that you can't really recommend to anyone as like a first Avengers story, because it's about like many decades full of worth of Avengers stories. It's kind of advanced placement for Avengers stories. All right, I think that's Betty Brant. Yeah, that's Betty Brant he's hanging out with. Oh, and Betty Brant's being kidnapped. He's got to go save his friend. Oh, goodness. And here are the X-Men in their late 90s costumes. Rogue is back in the green. And Marrow's hanging out. And Marrow is... she wants to go and figure out, who's doing these sewer killings. They want her to, sit back for a minute, because she hasn't done that well the last couple times she's been in the sewers, apparently. Oh, yeah, you were nearly killed by the Abomination. Yeah, well, because the Abomination is, like, really strong. And wow, he got his head hit. Yeah, you don't see that very often. Wakes up in a hospital bed and everyone is berating him for letting it happen. Oh, Flash Thompson's upset about it. Because him and Betty, well, they've dated on and off, so I guess maybe they were on at this point. No one messes around with Flash Thompson's woman. What year was this? This was like 1999, and Flash Thompson's still saying stuff like that. There's Marrow. She's getting into trouble. Spider-Man shows up. Oh, Lunchables. Still pushing the Disney Saturday morning on ABC. Oh, that's a nice. He was good for drawing Spider-Man. Interesting, kind of like sketchy, tiny little establishing shot in the corner here. See, he did interesting things with perspective, because he was very good at anatomy, and he could usually, play around with perspective to rather sophisticated effect. So here we are. We're going down to the Morlock tunnels. And he doesn't want to fight, because he wants to get to the bottom of it too. But she's a dangerous person who doesn't really have a lot of time or patience. I don't remember who this is. Is it Morbius or someone? He's here. Oh, who's this guy? Hunger? He looks like Moreland. He's not Moreland. Moreland wouldn't be created for like 2 years, but he's kind of got the same air. Don't know what this guy's deal is. Are you all right? Someone's losing their mind. So he basically womps Marrow, ready to womp Spider-Man. Thwack. So he leaves, and I have no idea what became of that guy, if he ever showed up again or not, what his deal was. I don't remember. I was not reading the Spider-Man books for very long after this. I was kind of burnt by this year, if I'm recalling correctly. Oh, and she doesn't understand why Flash Thompson would try to save his life or try to, risk his life to save mutants. Because Flash Thompson's a generally decent person. I don't recognize any of the names in the letters page. John Romita's back. I guess this was a fill-in for John Romita on the book. It was a bullpen. Yeah, bullpen's page. What was going on this month? Well, you were issue 15 of the Busick and Perez Avengers. The Joe Kelly Deadpool's already up to issue 27. He wasn't on it for that much longer. I think he was gone by like 35, 36, 37, somewhere around there. The first issue of Earth X. Oh, here's the run of Gambit with Fabian Niciez, and Steve Skroce did this one. Steve Skroce also drew some amazing Spider-Man. Tom DeFalco and Ron Lim on J2. That was the Spider-Girl spinoff with the Juggernaut's kid. The Marvel Knights Inhumans series with Paul Jenkins and Jay Lee. I'm not a fan of the Inhumans, but this is one of the best Inhuman stories that's ever been done. Slingers. Oh, Slingers are still going. I think I bought the first couple issues of Slingers. Here's that weird Keith Giffen Spider-Man Silver Surfer team-up that came out this time. The Eric Larson and Jeff Matsuda run on Wolverine, which is weird comics. Definitely people pulling at opposite ends. Terry Shoemaker and John Francis Moore on X-Force. We looked into X-Force from that era a while back. Talking about Slingers. Talking about the Avengers. The Jerry Ordway fill-in run on Avengers is coming up, I guess, next month. And the Stan Soapbox, which is just folks asking Stan questions and probably believing his answers. Here's a rather personal one from Jeremy Osterhus of Valencia, California. What motivates you to write and get ideas for stories? I'd like to give you a sage, profound, philosophical reply which would impress the heck out of you. The truth is, I'm motivated by greed. I want to keep getting paid. Well, that's refreshingly honest. My goodness. Oh, well. All right. So that's a good pile. We actually got through 5 this time. It was 6. We actually got through 6 this time. That's pretty impressive. All right. So, stick around. I got plenty of videos to watch on the channel. So, you can put them on when you go to sleep and listen to me, listen to my dulcet tones as you fall away to dreamland. I put up daily video reviews on TikTok and Instagram. There's a card for it on the screen right now. I have a lot of fun doing them. People who watch them seem to like them. I got a podcast with Claire Napier. We talk about Top Cow comics, Mark Silvestri, Michael Turner, Cyberforce, Witchblade, The Darkness, Fathom, all that good stuff. We're on Spotify. We're on Patreon. We're on YouTube as well. There are videos with full annotations that I put up, albeit very slowly. What else? Go check out my Patreon if you like these videos. If you want me to make more, that's how you show your support. I only really have time to make a couple a week. If people wanted to subscribe to my Patreon in large numbers, I can maybe make more than 2 videos a week. What else is there? Going to be restarting the newsletter after the first of the year on the Patreon, but there's nothing to sign up for yet. So just, I'll be mentioning that at some point in the near future. Y'all have a wonderful day. Be kind to yourself. Be kind to others. Be kind to children and small animals. Do something for you today. Be nice to yourself. I'll catch you later.